All right, welcome everybody. We're right on time at 2 minutes after 11 U.S. Eastern Time to the next in our series of office hours sessions that Nina and I have been hosting through Stuttering Therapy Resources during this stay-at-home time. Our original goal was to try to help clinicians adapt to telepractice and figure out how we can continue to help our students and their families during this very unusual time. But we sort of branched out. We've been talking about all sorts of things, talking about therapy for little ones, therapy for bigger ones, talking about helping families. This one, though, is wide open. We don't have a particular topic for this one, except ask us anything. Welcome to our office hours, Ask Us Anything session. I'm Scott Yaruss from Stuttering Therapy Resources. I'm a professor at Michigan State University, stuttering specialist. I do research on stuttering. I do treatment stuttering. And my colleague and friend,
Nina Reeves. I'm here in Texas. I'm a school-based and private practitioner specializing just with the kids who stutter. So we're really excited that you're here today. I know I see some people are typing. I get that little thing. I think we're getting some questions that are going to be coming in, but we can start off, Scott. One of the participants, I believe, that's already on today sent us a question ahead of time. Like, I'm getting in on this. I do not want to not get my question answered. So she sent us to info at Stuttering Therapy Resources. She sent us her question ahead of time. So Scott, you want to start that up and I'll jump in as we go?
You want me to start that question?
Oh, I can
Okay.
do that.
Why don't you start the question? Because I had a different one queued up. So
Okay. All right. So one of our participants had been asking about a young 6-year-old boy who that she has been seeing during this time. And there is a long and involved case study we don't need to get into. But one of the things that I think summarizing, and she can type in here if I get it wrong, is that this young man is has both articulation and some disfluencies. Disfluencies, most notably, are atypical. What she's telling us is that they are more atypical and not as much on the typical side, although some of those things are blending in. He's having some struggle with his talking. And mom, family is very concerned, very involved, and very concerned. And her questions revolved around in therapy, are we looking to create awareness? This child doesn't seem to be aware that these things are going on. And so are we supposed to go very direct with what our approach is, or are we supposed to stay more indirect in this approach because he's young and he's unaware? Love the idea that I get to say, I'm not exactly sure, but I'll qualify that. I'm not exactly sure because, of course, I'm not sitting in front of this child. I do not have the entire case history. I cannot give specific answers to a case. Just ethically, that's just not cool. Plus, I don't want it to become an idea that we know more about that child than this therapist does, because she does know more and she's been researching and reading and doing all the right things. She went ahead and looked for information and then asked for more information, which I applaud and I think is really wonderful. I believe that young children in general, and Scott, you can get in on this if you want, young children in general don't need to be made aware of something for us to fix it. I know that parents are concerned. I can understand that. When your child is struggling, every parent is concerned. They show that concern in different ways. I think a lot of our work with younger kiddos or kiddos who have just started to have some of these disfluencies is to help the parents understand that there's no quick fix on this and there's no reason for us to bring awareness in a negative way. So I'm telling you, I'm qualifying this answer. It is okay to talk about what's going on. It is okay to talk about talking. I love Dean Williams. Talk about talking. Let's chat about chatting. Let's see if this child has any awareness that he's having some struggles, and make sure that we're asking those questions in ways that don't bring negative attention. Like, we're not pointing it out. Oh, gotcha. Oh, that was one. Oh, right there. No, we're talking to children in ways that bring interest to communication. So I'm just wondering, you know, what is it that you think we're doing here in speech today? He's 6. Find out if he knows why he's there. It's okay if he does. We're not trying to keep it a secret, but find out from children what they perceive, and then help them have more of a healthy look at the fact that we are speech therapists and we're helping you communicate easier. We're finding ways to help communication be easy for you. Okay. So I don't know if I'm answering her specific question on what she should do with that case, but I'm trying to look at the global general ideas that I would present to any clinician that came and said to me, what about his awareness? What should I be doing with that? Scott?
Great. I just want to add a little tiny bit to it. You know, in our field, we have been trained for so long to fear awareness of stuttering. And we get asked all the time, what if the child becomes aware? Or what if I accidentally draw it to his attention? And the parents see this out on the internet and they say, oh, there was that one time when he walked into the room when we were talking about his stuttering. They feel so guilty and worried about that. And in our field, we have spent a long time, years, telling parents not to do this, except we now know from years of research, like more than 2 decades of research, that it's okay for kids to know that they stutter. And in fact, most of them already know. We're not hiding anything from them. The key is how we present the information to them, and we can present the information to them in a way that helps them develop healthy, appropriate attitudes toward communication, not in a way that's frightening or corrective or punishing for them. We have tons more to say about that. I just want to share my screen with you for just a second and let you know where you can find some information. Here on our website, under the resources tab here, if you scroll down a little bit, you will find one of our free handouts. It's helping young children develop healthy attitudes toward communication. This comes directly from our early childhood stuttering therapy book, which covers ages about 2 to 6, but this is about how parents can talk to kids about stuttering, and incidentally about how we can talk to kids about stuttering so that they develop their awareness and understanding in a supportive way. Nothing to fear, nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to feel like they did something wrong. And then we can give parents words that they can use that open up a conversation that they really want to have, right? When the parent sees that the child is in crisis, she wants to help. Of course she does. But our field has really told her a lot of things she's not supposed to do, and not so much about what we can do instead. Lots more to say about that, but perhaps that's a bit of a start there. You know, I had a few questions come in on the private channel that you wouldn't have seen on the chat, so I want to answer a couple of them. I've promised people some answers. So one of them is a very good question along these lines. Do we ever have a need to refer parents to counseling psychologists to support the emotional aspects of stuttering? And indeed, absolutely we do. Most of what we do related to stuttering and emotions does indeed fall within our scope of practice as speech language. Well, no, let me change that. Everything that we do falls within our scope of practice, right? Most of what we need to do falls within our scope of practice. But you will absolutely run across families that need more help, specifically on family dynamics, social interaction, perhaps anxiety. And so you should not hesitate in 2 situations. You should not hesitate to refer. Situation number 1 is if the concerns that the child and the family are expressing are outside the domain of communication, right? Our scope of practice ends there. And if it's not about communication, it's not our domain. That doesn't mean we just say, oh, sorry, can't talk to you about that, see you. We can guide them and provide a bridge to other professionals when it's outside our scope of practice. And number two, when we ourselves don't feel comfortable or skilled to do the counseling. So indeed, I have relationships with counseling psychologists that I know that I can refer to. I, in my personal practice, don't do it often simply because I feel very confident and competent in these other areas. But I wasn't always that way. When I was a beginning clinician, I referred much more and I learned a tremendous amount from those referrals and from the interactions that I had with the counseling psychologist. That helped me build my skills so that I was better able to support my clients. So the answer to the question is absolutely, we do that when needed. Nina?
And I'll piggyback on that. I agree with everything Scott said, as always, but I'm going to also add, in the public schools, we have to be careful about how we present that information to a parent. It's definitely doable. When we are concerned about one of our students in the United States, if we say your child probably should go see a psychologist about this, or I'm concerned and maybe you'd like to see a psychologist, that actually almost puts and many times could put the district in the position of having to pay for it, because a professional that works for the district just made a referral. Now, there's a difference between making a referral and having a conversation with a parent. And so I think it's okay to bring up concerns, to validate concerns that parents bring to you, because many times parents already know what you're seeing. It's just that you haven't said that to them yet. And I think it's okay for us to say, I'm just wondering about Johnny's, ability to blank in the real world. I've been noticing in our therapy sessions that these types of things are happening, and he's bringing up these fears, and these are outside of my scope of practice, but I'm wondering what you're thinking about that and what you've been considering. And I think that's fine, because that's not a referral, but we can't just in the public schools pretend that we don't see things and pretend that we're not concerned. And case in point, I'm going to make a very small just case moment that I just had happen to me last week. I've been concerned about a young girl for a while. COVID has put her into a space of almost closing down. And I had to have a conversation with the mom. And I said, listen, I know you guys are doing a lot of things all at once. I am perfectly capable of pulling back the speech therapy. One of my private kids, I have to say, I'm comfortable pulling back on the speech therapy in order to support your ability to help find her someone to help her with these other things that I can't help her with. And I will work with that professional to help educate about stuttering and to help understand about how stuttering could play a role in some of the things that she's dealing with. But I think it's okay for us to say to our parents of the kids that we're working with when we see concerns.
One last thought on that, and unless you have one that's come in, I've got another one that's come in here, and that is, if you're in the schools, you do have a diagnostic team, child's care team to work with, and so there may be caseworker, social worker, there may be a school psychologist you can be working with. That's not always the case, but there may be that, and so that can also provide some support for you. All right, I have I have one. Should I go next? Okay. I've been asked, if a child goes through stuttering spurts that come and go, is that a good sign that they won't always stutter? It's a terrific question. In fact, in my opinion, one of the most understudied aspects of stuttering is something that everybody knows about stuttering, but we don't fully understand, and that's the variability of stuttering. The fact that it's there in some situations and not in other situations, but the fact that it's there for some periods of time and not at other periods of time. And we would really, really like to interpret something about that variability as perhaps being predictive of whether the child is going to continue stuttering or not. Sadly, at this point, we don't have the data to be able to do that. At this point, we just don't know. It seems like a good thing. And I remember, Bob will correct me, Bob Queasel, good friend who's on the call here, he'll correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I remember Dean Williams talking about the peaks not being as high and the troughs being a little longer, and that being a good sign toward recovery. We do know that the reverse is true. If you see stuttering staying at a high level or increasing over a period of time, that's not the direction that we're looking for, right? So in general, yes, but we don't have data to say one of the factors that increases the likelihood of recovery is variability, because all stuttering is variable. We know, in fact, one of my recently graduated doctoral students, Dr. Seth Tishner, and I just have a paper in review right now on variability in adults who stutter. Interesting thing, people who stutter almost unanimously report that they experience this kind of variability over time. And they report it as being the second most frustrating aspect of the disorder, second only to the fact that they stutter. The thing they don't like the most is the stuttering. The thing that they don't like second most is the variability. I've been fortunate. I'll be, yes, Bob's pointing out, I'm sorry, Bob, I just unmasked you. It'd be very hard to do a good study on variability over the long term. That's true, absolutely. But I've been very fortunate to get a very good score on an NIH grant to study the problem of variability and looking at stuttering in the real world. So check back with me in a few years and maybe we'll have some more information. All right, Nina, do you have one? I've got a couple others. But
Go ahead. I just got one that came in. I'd like to read it and formulate.
sorry, I muted myself. Okay, great. One that came in related to the current stay-at-home time. Obviously, this is a stressful time for everyone, and it's a very difficult time. And people are eager to try to get back to a sense of normalcy, both the parents and the kids themselves. The most common comment when I ask my school-age students right now, so how you doing this week? The most common thing they say is, I'm bored. So they're bored and they're driving their parents nuts, and their parents, of course, want to be able to get back to work and all sorts of challenges with this. But I have seen it posted several times on Facebook, questions like, has anybody ever noticed that kids are stuttering more during this stay-at-home time? And then people will pop on and say, oh, yes, see, they said it wasn't anxiety, but it is. And see, they said it's not emotional. Yeah, we have to be very careful not to fall into the trap of thinking that stuttering is caused by anxiety. Yes, people are experiencing anxiety. Got that, okay. And anxiety can take existing stuttering and make it more apparent, but it's not going to create kids who stutter, who don't previously stutter. Okay, we have to remember that anxiety is not a cause of stuttering. Stuttering is not an emotional disorder. Stuttering is a condition that can have emotional consequences, to be sure. But one of the things I wonder if it might be going on here, and I see agreement in the comments, is that the parents are spending quite a bit more time with their kids right now than they may have. And they may be noticing the stuttering that the child was previously doing at school. Well, now he's doing it at home and they're seeing it, right? That creates more fear for the parent, causes the parent to lose sleep. You get long emails from the parents wondering what to do. That puts pressure on the speech therapist, feeling like, oh, I've got to do something, and it's a lot of fear. That's why one of the very first messages that Nina and I recorded when we started doing these office hour sessions and started creating new materials for helping people through this stay-at-home time, the title of the first recordings that we did are not don't panic. I'm bringing up my sheet here, and here it is: new video for parents of school-age kids, don't panic, and new video for parents of preschool children, don't panic. The panic is normal. The panic is understandable, but the panic doesn't help anybody. I'm not saying the panic causes stuttering, because stuttering is not an emotional problem, but the panic just makes it harder for everyone to cope. So absolutely, let's respond to the situations that we're seeing, but let's not misinterpret the reason for it.
Excellent. Thanks, Scott. And in fact, I had a question that came up to me privately about that's going to feed right from what you just said, and I'll echo it and then hopefully add to it. It's about a person who stutters and then had post-traumatic stress, and could that event, of course, increase stuttering? And what you just talked about is exactly true, because when we see stress increased for someone who stutters, it's not that it caused it, as Scott was just explaining, but can it exacerbate it? Can it make it harder for that person to communicate? Of course. It makes sense that stress reacts in the body. It reacts in neurology, it reacts in motor, it reacts in communication. And when I'm working with young kids and their parents, I'm especially trying to help parents understand in an easier way what this is all about. And actually, I must say, my speech therapy colleagues, if we can help people understand that stress triggers all sorts of physical manifestations, okay? And of course, if stress triggers physical manifestations, it can impact speech tension, it can impact the ability to communicate to in an easier way. So the society has often looked at stress and anxiety, okay, more stuttering. And what they haven't thought about is that middle ground, the physical manifestations of stress that can be part of what increases moments of stuttering for a person who stutters. So again, stress doesn't cause, but and by the way, let's stop using the word stress right now. Let's start using the word any kind of emotion, okay? Any kind of emotion can feed stuttering. Happiness, excitement, not just fear or stress or anxiety, but many things can impact the ability of a person who stutters to communicate in an easier way.
My turn? Oops, my turn? Great, my turn. Another one that came in earlier that I want to make sure to get to, and again, one that I see on the Facebook groups quite a bit, is people wanting to get advice about whether a child needs therapy based on a brief snippet of speech, maybe a video, or the report of a parent or of a teacher, or of a frequency count that they give. Child was X% disfluent or whatever, okay? On the surface, that seems like a sensible way of deciding whether or not a child needs therapy. But we've got some really difficult research that we need to come to terms with that tells us that simply looking at a child's speech behavior in the preschool years tells us absolutely nothing about whether or not the child needs therapy. This is hard. This is not what we'd expect. You'd think, oh, well, I want to see how severe the behavior is, and if it's more severe, then the child must need help. But research done by Ehud Yairi showed that for young children, ages 3 and 4, the amount of stuttering that they do during a diagnostic evaluation does not relate to whether or not the child needs treatment, whether or not the child is at risk for continuing to stutter. There are other factors that we look to help us get that answer, but the amount of stuttering that the child does tells us nothing. As kids get older and they continue to stutter, then yes, we learn something about it in a 5 and 6 year old, but in a 3 and 4 year old. So this one is really important. And if I could tell my colleagues across the world just one thing about early childhood stuttering, it would be this: don't simply dismiss a child's speech behavior because you don't see much stuttering in a speech sample. It is meaningless. Why? Because the behavior varies. Yeah, we just talked about variability. Why else? Because some children may stutter severely yet make a full recovery, and other kids may not stutter all that much yet be in it for the long haul. Yet if we allow people to persist in believing that they can just look at a sample and make this decision, we're going to keep missing kids. Now, here's why people have been able to get away with this. because there's a very high recovery rate in 3-year-old children. So if you just always say, he'll recover, he'll recover, he'll recover, like pediatricians tend to do, if you just always say, he'll recover, he'll recover, he'll recover, you'll be right 75% of the time, right? You didn't do any clinical decision making. You were born on third base and thought you hit a triple. You just happened to get right because of the averages, right? It does no good at all, though, and it's actually a disservice to those 25% who are at risk for continuing to stutter. So if there is one thing that we need to do as a profession is we need to stop telling people, oh yeah, my kid went through a period of doing that, or I've seen lots of kids. 75% of the time you're going to be right without even trying. What we need to do instead is look to the risk factors. And yet again, I'm going to share my screen and just show you that Nina and I have written on our blog tons and tons about the risk factors. If you look at the tag early childhood stuttering therapy, oh, we'll get there. There's a lot. I just can't find them right now. Preschool children, how do we write IEP goals? Don't just tell parents to wait and see what happens. What are the different approaches for treating preschoolers? There's a lot of blog entries there, hoping to try to change the way we look at early childhood stuttering so we don't, again, fall into that trap that's been proven to be wrong. It's not what we were taught once upon a time, but the science has progressed. We've got new science now. Let's use that. Your turn.
And the other thing that I want to make sure that we all continue to understand about what Scott was just discussing is not only is it variable, and that some children have a high degree of stuttering and still in the young ages still recover, but let's not forget that young children and of course our older students never just look at the sample because they could be hiding their stutter and they could be not talking as much as they wanted to talk or not saying everything they wanted to say. So it looks fluent on the surface. And as one of my kids continues to tell me, I'm stuttering on the inside. And so it's really important to bring that up when people like to just say it's about the fluency count, because we know, and we've known for a very long time, that that's not what it's about. Not our entrance into therapy and not our progress in therapy. If we could stop focusing on the fluency and the counts and start talking about communication and how is this child able to communicate freely and spontaneously with stutters or without, then that's really, I think, where we're trying to reframe the culture. Things like National Stuttering Awareness Week that's going on right now in the United States, and International Stuttering Awareness Day, which is October 22nd every year, no matter what day it falls on. And we've kind of made it, International Stuttering Awareness Month, basically. So I want to encourage everyone to find out what really is the story behind the stutter and start focusing our efforts on that.
There's one I want to piggyback on just really, really quickly that just came up. I have a backlog, but I want to make sure I don't miss this one. Great questions came up from Natalie, and I know it's okay to say your name because you sent it to everybody. So about when you're considering family history, does it count as a child having a family history if they had a family member who stuttered as a young child and then recovered? Is that family history? And we need more research on this. There is very good research being done on this question. Dr. Shelley Jo Kraft at Wayne State University here in Michigan is the leader in this area. And what we know from, again, from work done by Ehud Yairi and his team, we know that if a female child has a female relative who recovered. That improves the odds just a little bit, okay? But we are playing statistical margins here. And so, although that may be statistically true, it's not the only factor that I make a decision based on. I factored in with a bunch of other risk factors that we consider. And I don't know that I've ever had a situation where that's pushed me over the line to say, oh, no, great grandma recovered, so don't worry about therapy. I think the more cautious approach is to say if there was any history of any family history of stuttering in anybody for any period of time, check that box until we have more research on the topic. In time, we will. But for right now, it seems to me that the more cautious approach is to count it, even if someday we may revise that. Your turn.
All right. I'm at a bit of a disadvantage because I think you've got more of the questions coming into your side. And so one thing that I'll do before I have you go to another one is our wonderful colleague Bob Queasel and co-author of all of the bullying series that you see on our website.
And the Oasis.
And the Oasis. Sorry, yeah. He did say something in the chat that I'd like to bring up. When I answered the question about PTSD, post-traumatic stress, I was answering it in a global term, in a global way. And I think he's right to bring up the idea that PTSD is not, as he put it, garden variety anxiety. So that has its own sub-culture and sub-understanding. I have never worked with a person with PTSD. And so I can't speak to exactly how the stuttering is going to be involved with that person. But understanding that it's not just about stress or anxiety, that is an entirely different diagnosis that you have to work closely with other professionals on.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I have a backlog here. There's an interesting one here that I want to speculate on. And let me preface this by saying I know of no research on this topic. That doesn't mean it's not there, but I know of no research. The question of whether movement can help stuttering. Sometimes speech seems better, and I'm going to talk about that word better in just a minute, after gym class or running around during recess. First of all, why did I get a little excited about the word better? Nina and I always try to be careful about the words that we use to describe stuttering so that we are not ever putting a value judgment on fluency or on stuttering. The word better in and of itself suggests that there's something else that's less good, right? And I don't bring this up to attack you in any way. We hear this all the time, and it's sort of a pet peeve. In fact, today what we're doing, we might have just called this Scott's Pet Peeves. That's what we're doing today for our Ask Us Anything. So I would say you're maybe seeing kids stutter less after these, after these activities. And that's probably just the variability of stuttering. One of the things that we know about variability is that sometimes we can sort of make sense of it by saying, oh, yeah, it makes sense that they're stuttering more now or stuttering less now. But sometimes we just can't make sense of it. And we will chase our tails trying to come up with explanations until we have research. Give me a couple of years. I will soon be collecting the first ever, believe it or not, the first ever real world samples of people's speech in real world settings, at work, in the Starbucks, with their friends, with their family. Every study that we've got in the field, every study is based on a lab collected speech sample or a clinic collected speech sample. There were 2 attempts to collect real world speech in sort of contrived settings, and that's it. So I wouldn't read too much into it just yet. Give us a little time. We need research on that. But the reason I said I wanted to talk about speculation a little bit here is because I've heard some people say that they notice partnering with OTs for some children being a beneficial activity for their overall communication. There's no research on it that I know of, I had a doctoral student, now Dr. Sujini Ramachandar, who was going to study that for a PhD, and we couldn't get the academic OTs interested in it at all. That's just not a thing that they cared about when we asked them. But I would love to see some research on that someday. For right now, we don't have it. Great. Raquel asked a really good question. What term do we use to complement a child's increased fluency? First of all, I would never do it. I don't compliment fluency because the point of talking is not to be fluent. A child doesn't open his mouth in order to be fluent. He opens his mouth in order to communicate. Complicate, complement his communication, what he said, because that's what matters. If you need to talk about more stuttering or less stuttering, maybe not with the child, but with somebody else or with an older child, fine. I talk about more stuttering and less stuttering. Yeah, not better or worse, not um, you know, really got very stuck there. But oh, that was easier or that was harder. That's fine. But you said what you wanted to say. Good for you. Praise the communication.
And I'm just chomping at the bit because Scott and I talk about this all the time. It's one of our very big passions, is that when we focus on fluency and when we congratulate fluency, the child gets that message that stuttering is what? Bad. Okay, so whatever you say to the child, that was good talking, you didn't stutter once, becomes, oh, when you do stutter, it must be bad talking. It's an unintended consequence that no professional or parent ever intends. But if you're just focusing on the behavior, you're trying to complement a behavior, and that child may or may not have any idea how that fluency happened. They can't replicate it because stuttering varies. So let's help them understand that what we're looking for is what you are saying and not how you are saying it. And let's talk about if you want to help a child learn how to use a skill, an actual therapy strategy, then you can talk about how did that strategy feel? What did it do for you? Did it increase your ability to have easier communication? We want to use language that supplies them with a context to be able to feedback for themselves and not have people outside of them tell them whether they've done good or bad talking. My favorite thing to say to clinicians is there's an old poster that says, something, ways to praise a child, and it's one of the posters I see in almost every principal's office. I actually think we shouldn't be using that, because it is very dichotomous. It's good or bad, pretty or ugly. And let's start using context words that really help the child understand what we're trying to do with them and for them in therapy.
Yeah, I pulled up one of them. It's wow, way to go, super, you're special. Those don't help the child understand what he's doing, right? You
Mm-hmm.
said what you wanted to say. You're a great communicator. That was a really interesting story. Thank you for sharing that thought with me. Those things help the child keep their attention and their focus and their own personal judgments on what they were trying to do in the first place. Yeah.
And look at you taking a risk and getting in that communication situation, even though you told me your stuttering was pretty big today. So that's the kind of thing, what we're talking about right now is so helpful for kids so that they can start to frame their own context. What do you got, Scott?
I'm just bringing up one more. Oh, it's in a book. It's not on a blog. I thought I had a blog on it. We have a little section in our book called, um, um, oh, I just forgot what it's called. It's something like, if they're not good days and bad days, then what do we call them?
Yes.
Right? Yeah,
Yes.
something like, I can't.
Yeah.
I had the words in just a moment ago. All
Yeah.
right, I have a good challenging one here that I'll cover if you want. Let's see who asked. Where'd I go? Oh, I have a
Mm-hmm.
question. Yes, came from Kelly's iPhone. Thank you, Kelly's iPhone. That went to everybody, so it's okay if I say that. Talking a little bit about syllable time speech at the Westmead program. Indeed, there is an approach to treating stuttering that is based on, and this is young children, preschool children, that is based on the idea of changing or manipulating the duration of syllables, because we all know that when people speak more slowly, they tend to be more fluent. It was developed in Australia. It's got some data behind it. It is basically what people have done for a really long time on using some slightly slowed speech, just a slightly different way of doing that. Like many programs, and you'll hear Nina and I talk about how programs are not how we approach stuttering. Um, like many programs, there are strong adherents who are proponents of the program. But we know from common factors research that it's not so much the program that makes a difference, it's the relationship with the clinician, and it is adherence to a program that makes a difference. For Westmead, though, there's just not a ton of data on it yet. It does show that some kids get more fluent, some kids get quite a bit more fluent. Of course, we have the whole 75% recovery issue that we've got to be able to beat. You know, if you want to do a treatment outcome study with a preschooler, you got to make sure that more than 75% of your kids recover from stuttering, because otherwise it's just natural recovery. And if you're putting everyone into a treatment program already, just take that bottom 75, say, hey, those kids were going to get better no matter what you did. So we don't really have great research at the margins then. The research that has been done has been based on the LIDCOM program, which is an operant conditioning therapy, and based on the Restart DCM approach. DCM is demands and capacities model approach, which is a combined sort of less direct, more direct, comprehensive approach. If the topic of less direct and more direct therapy is of interest to you, I just recently did a 2-hour webinar for ASHA specifically on the topic of less direct and more direct treatment for preschool children who stutter. And I talked about the various approaches that are available. It's available now for free with the ASHA Learning Pass through June 30th. So if you want to watch that, you can. So, all right, I'm going to say one thing, and then, yes, I'm thrilled. Bob is going to join in here. Let me say one thing. Bob, meanwhile, get your camera up and running and get your mic unmuted. So I talked about there's some people who are really strong adherents to these programs. You'll hear people say, I always use Westmead, or I always use syllable time speech with everybody, or I always use LIDCOM. And that's wrong, in my opinion. I know that's a very direct way for me to say that, but there is no way that any one treatment is best for everyone, period. What we need to do is provide individualized, customized treatment for each person and family that we're working with. Otherwise, we end up being a lot like those ads that you see on the internet. You have herpes? Try this one weird trick. I don't know why the example of herpes came to my mind, but that's what's on CNN right behind my screen right there. Yeah, try this one weird trick to fix your gallstones. Well, child is stuttering, use Westmead. Child is stuttering, use LIDCOM. Child is stuttering, use Palin. Whatever the approach is, it's not the specific approaches. It's not using individualized, customized therapy. And so that's where I said, oh, I have to, Bob's brought up toenail fungus here. Bob, let me let you start your video there. You should be able to do it now. But that's where that stuff makes me crazy. I see it all the time. Anybody who says they always do something for a child, run. Everyone, Dr. Bob Kweasel.
Hello, everybody. How are you?
They say they're great.
Everyone's muted, right?
So the floor is yours, Bob.
The floor's mine for what?
Oh, you asked if you could horn in because you wanted to talk about Westmead.
I said when you said I had to turn on my microphone and camera when I was ready, I said, I've got to horn in. It was a question. In other words, I had to sort of jump in without being invited. That's what I was asking about.
Misunderstood. I thought you wanted to talk about syllable time speech.
No. Well, I mean, again, anything like that. My thing always is that, sure, if I do anything slower, I'm going to do it better, right? because doing things faster generally causes you to have more trouble doing them, right? So if I talk more slowly, I'm probably going to be more fluent. But generally, if I'm not speaking at a rate that's comfortable for me, then what ends up happening is that at some point I go back to my normal way of speaking. And again, I'd like to see some long-term data for any sort of a treatment like that involves teaching somebody to use their mechanism in a way that's not really the way that they would typically use it. Because again, I've learned over the many years I was in therapy a lot of ways to modify my speech. But the problem is, because it's not the way I normally talk, they were not things that I was able to maintain over a long period of time. So.
Excellent. And indeed, what happens too often, and I understand why, I'm not meaning to blame people with this, but people get seduced by that temporary fluency that's there. Oh, when we do this, they don't stutter. We should all do this. And that's why there are fads. That's why these ideas come and go. And it's a challenge, because it is hard both for speakers and for clinicians to ignore that apparently magical fluency. But it won't stay if it's not natural. And there's a lot of reasons for it, but the biggest one of the biggest reason is simply nobody wants to talk in an unnatural way. And what is natural for a person who stutters is stuttered speech. And if we help them know that, then that's okay. That's how their brain is, right? And that's one of the most important facts that we learn about the brain research, is that people aren't doing something wrong when they stutter. People aren't doing something abnormal for them. They're being themselves. And that's why we look these days, instead of to severity measures that focus on how a listener judges a person, we look more toward measures of comfort, of spontaneity. This is work done by Dr. Chris Constantino, of freedom of communication. Dr. David Shapiro's book was called something like Freedom of Communication. I can't remember what it's called now, but the word freedom is in there. Dr. Mark Allen talked about speaking freely, although he also did some speech management kind of stuff. But it's about being able to communicate in a way that you want to. I'm a little bit behind on questions. Does anybody, do you want to jump in, Nina, while I catch up?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Bob, for jumping in on that. And I think, perspective of a person who stutters. There's something to think about. It's really true. Hello, ring ring. Is there any idea that helps us understand what trying to do something that's artificial and that doesn't fit with who you are? If anyone on this call or anyone watching the replay has ever tried a one-size-fits-all exercise program, stop smoking program, weight loss program, and then found themselves yo-yoing, hello, it's about the fact that human behavior and our understanding of what's going on when people who are stuttering is complex. So let's talk about the complexity of the disorder in a way that helps us know it's not something we can't do, because we can help, but it's not a simplistic 1, 2, 3, here's the next shiny new thing that's on Facebook or wherever. Help us help people who stutter and their families become, and I'm going to say it again, savvy consumers of what they see and hear. And let's make certain that we're not professionals who are just jumping on the next shiny object. We do it because we love kids and people who stutter and we want to help. And that's why we got into the profession. But we have to stop and pull back and say, what is this based on? How long ago was the research? How wide is the research? Do you know how many people were in the study somebody is spouting? It's really important that we are the professionals to have that conversation with ourselves before we go on to the any shiny new object in any way, not even just with stuttering, but with any children that we serve.
Great. There are two more questions that are in the chat that I want to try to get to. We're running a little low on time, so I will try to be succinct. One is about group therapy for adults. Um, Indeed, there are many, many benefits to group therapy in terms of generalization and more natural settings and support that comes from being with other people. I want to separate out the group therapy that's done where the grouping is intentional from the grouping that so often has to be done due to scheduling and availability that we see in schools, okay? It's interesting, though. There's very little research on grouping in particular with people who stutter. I have a master's student right now who, oh, bye, Bob. I have a master's student right now who is doing a thesis on this topic, trying to understand the factors that contribute to grouping. But the question in particular was about adults. And with adults, indeed, the benefits that come from connecting with other people who stutter cannot be overstated. And that's why Nina and I have been so involved with the support organizations, encouraging people who stutter to connect with one another, because stuttering is a very isolating condition. It can be, at least. It can keep people from forming connections. Seth Tishner and I have just started up a brand new study. We are looking at social isolation for people who stutter, sparked by this period of time when other people are experiencing some social isolation in a way that they haven't before. We're doing this with Dr. Scott Palcic and Katie Gore, looking at the social isolation experienced by people who stutter, and how does that compare to what others are experiencing? It's different. We know that. We need to describe how it's different, because people who stutter may not speak up. They may not form the friendships they want to be forming. They may not engage when they want to engage. Number one goal with one of my clients right now, an adult, is he wants to speak up more in meetings. That's his number one goal, but his fear is holding him back. So the more we can help people connect with others who understand, whether that be through a support or self-help organization or through a group therapy setting, it can be tremendously powerful for them. So I encourage it.
And Monica shared a question that I think we may not be able to get to because we're heading towards the top of the hour. We have some wrap-up information. I'll go ahead and email Monica some ideas as well. But I think what I want to say in response, if other people can see Monica's question, she said it to everyone. I think that the voices of people who stutter could help out with this in educating not only parents and listeners, but speech language pathologists across the world to get the message of the idea of the well-intentioned, meaningless advice that kids who stutter and people who stutter have gotten throughout the ages. Well-intentioned because people want to help, but meaningless in the idea that, again, stuttering is a complex disorder, a quick fix if you just stop and think about what you want to say, if you just start over. And I think Scott's you're pulling up the slideshow, aren't you, Scott? Or no?
It is ready.
Okay. And I'd like you to see something we just posted yesterday. That is a slideshow of the voices of our students about what parents and listeners, and that includes speech language pathologists, need to understand about stuttering and what people who stutter want, at least these kiddos want people to know. And in fact, there's a video at the end of an 18-year-old young lady who's sharing her perspectives. And I think that answers so many of our questions and is coming from a more powerful place. These bits of advice and the goals that focus on fluency are well-intentioned, but for many people who stutter, not achievable. And even if they're achievable, they're not tenable. They're not able to be held in real life all the time. And then my students, I've had to pick up the pieces of those kiddos who have gone through those programmed approaches that, and then they come back saying, oh my gosh, I'm a failure because I'm still stuttering, or I'm stuttering again, or I'm stuttering more. And they ride that roller coaster of trying to fix instead of trying to learn how to handle, and on the path of acceptance. And so I hope that you guys avail yourselves of, oh, that was a Midwestern thing to say, you guys, I hope that you will all be able to avail yourselves of some of those types of connections, as Scott was just talking about. We really want to connect people who stutter, speech language pathologists, and parents and families with others who are walking in the same shoes or who have already walked the walk. And it's with the caveat that just because something worked for one person doesn't mean it works for everyone, because everyone, and I think one of my 13-year-olds put on her slide, everyone who stutters is different. And I can't say it any more strongly. So we hope that you'll enjoy some of those things that we've been posting.
Oh, can I say it more strongly?
Oh, sure.
It's one of my
You
pet
always do.
It's one of my pet peeves, though, because it's very difficult for parents. They say, "Oh, I've got a parent right now who's really struggling with this." They say, "All right, now everybody says that Joe Biden stutters, but I never see him stutter. Can you promise me that my child will be as fluent as Joe Biden?" Like, no, I can't promise that. Everybody's different. And John Stossel, I'm just trying to make sure I balance the political sides here. John Stossel, everybody says that he stutters, but I've never seen him stutter. Can you make my child as fluent as John Stossel? And the answer, nope, I can't. Sorry. I don't know how fluent your child will be able to be. It depends upon a host of other factors. But the pressure that puts on kids and on parents, the guilt, right? And so when you see somebody who stutters, absolutely, we need to learn from their experiences. But we don't want to presume that other people will have the same experiences. Anytime somebody tells me, well, this is what I did, I say, that is just great. I'm thrilled for you. Perhaps there are others for whom that will also work, but perhaps not. And that's okay. All right. I'm done.
Well, and it's right at the top of the hour. And so
Yeah.
we want to, I'm going to pull up the slide deck, and I'm going to say that, yes, we are going to have one more office hour for now. We plan to be back with you on next Friday. And this is going to be a fun one because we're going to be asking our social media followers what we should talk about. Because we thought, okay, we're trying to get more engaged on social media all the time, because we know that is where a lot of people are trying to gain information, and we want to make sure that there's quality information in lots of arenas, including Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And so we are trying to get involved and connected with people, so we're going to let them choose what we discuss next week.
I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Those of you who are watching this on the recorded video, thank you for that. If you have questions, you know how to reach us. It's right there, and we are thrilled to have the chance to do that. And I want to thank our special guest today, Dr. Bob Kweasel, for joining us. So, awesome.